Hello. Have you ever suffered with problems with sleep and struggled to get your children to sleep effectively? Oh boy, this is a big one. I know I have. So let's get into it and see what we can come up with. My name's Sarah Jane Critchley. I'm the author of A Different Joy, The Parent's Guide to Living Better with Autism, Dyslexia, ADHD and more. So without further ado, why is it that this is how we feel so much of the time? That like this little bear, we end up sitting there on our laptops or on our phones, looking at things, not sleeping, and then wondering why we actually don't get a good 7 to 8 hours sleep. And then the morning rocks around and we're tired and we're cranky and we eat lots of stuff we're not meant to eat, and we find it really difficult to cope when things are tricky. And if you have an autistic child, you will know that if they have slept well, the day can be dramatically different. One of the things that we experienced was that having spent years struggling with sleep issues, especially with my daughter, we actually then began to give the responsibility over to her as she became an adult, and she has worked on her sleep hygiene, and it has made a massive difference to her and to her well-being and her wellness as well. So I've got lots of things to share with you on this one. Stick with me. Okay, so first of all, does sleep really matter? Oh yes. Oh my word, my word, my word. If there were just one thing that you could do that would make a huge difference to your life, is cracking this one. I've recently made this a real priority, and I know that when I succeed in getting between 7 and 8 hours sleep, I haven't quite managed 8 yet, and not over 9 or 10, over 9 or 10 regularly is not a good thing, but under 7 or 8 is not a good thing either. Then I'm able to cope with things, my resourcefulness increases, my ability to problem solve is massive. There have been studies that liken sleep deprivation or feeling sleepy to being as unable to function as having 2 glasses of wine, as being actually under the influence of alcohol and unable to drive above the drink drive limit has the same effect if you are sleep deprived. So what's sleep actually for? What does our body need sleep for? We know that it's a good thing. Okay, it's a good thing, so why? Well, there are several things that science is telling us at the moment. The first thing is that it's for brain function. When you go to sleep at night, what happens is that your brain sets up new connections between the cells in the brain, these wonderful things called neurons that actually make linkages. It's like a wonderful network that connects things. And those brain pathways, those thoughts that you have, those connections that your brain made during the day, those are connected overnight, those are reinforced overnight, and the ones that you don't use are pruned away and got rid of. And that action of pruning actually helps to clear your brain, it helps to clean up the thought process, it makes your brain work more efficiently. And interestingly, I did see some research the other day that suggested that that brain pruning doesn't happen as often in people with autism, people who are autistic. So if that's the case, then sleep has a real big impact on that. And if that pruning is part of what's not happening, then that could be one of the reasons why autistic people struggle a lot with sleep and with the impact of that on thought processes. There's also been some really good research recently that said that the fluid around the brain has lots of different waste chemicals that build up during the day, and that those waste chemicals are effectively washed clear overnight. And you need the time for that to happen. If you don't get enough time for that to happen, then there's going to be more kind of waste materials hovering around in your brain, and that's going to impede it working as effectively the next day. It helps you to make sense of what you've experienced. When you allow your subconscious to actually work through what's happened, that processing, some of that doesn't happen when you're awake, it happens actually when you're asleep. And that wonderful subconscious gets to work and gets to identify what's happened and to understand it and make sense of it all. And I've discovered in my own life that what it does is it gives you the opportunity to think through different ways of dealing with things, different scenarios, different ways you could have been in a particular environment. And so many times I go to bed thinking, right, I've got this particular problem I've got to solve. How can I do that differently? Then I relax, go to sleep, and in the morning, invariably, bing, I'll have these amazing ideas. Think, that's what I need to do. And I'll forget that that's actually the question I ask myself at night. And then these things come through. It's fantastic. And the final thing is obviously physical recovery. Your body needs downtime in order to recover. Now, if any of those don't happen, it's going to leave us feeling less than fabulous. So how much do we actually need? Well, a really lovely graphic here produced by the Sleep Council. It depends on your age. It depends on your neurology, it depends on your physiology, it depends what else is going on. But normally, babies would need 14 to 15 hours of sleep a day. You'll notice that if you've had a newborn, they seem to sleep all the time except when you want to be asleep. Notice that. When they get to be between 1 and 3 hours, it's recommended that they get between 12 and 14 hours sleep a day. And when we say per day here, we mean in a 24-hour period, okay? 3 to 6 year olds between 10 and 12 hours, 7 to 12 year olds between 10 and 11 hours, and then as they get into teenage, 8 to 9 hours. And then when we become adults, normally 7 to 9 hours a day is ideal, and as you get older, slightly less, so 7 to 8 if you're over 65. So that would be a normal pattern of sleep. But why is it so difficult for autistic people? Well, often autistic people may have problems if their routine's been disrupted. That can impact on whether they can fall asleep easily. Having sensory sensitivities means you're going to be far more aware of any noise that happens, and having a good environment to fall asleep is really important. Lots of autistic people would have a different body clock, so there's an element, we don't know enough scientifically about how autism and sleep work. We know that it's an issue, but as to why and how and what to do about it, that's far more unknown at this stage. But having different things going on definitely has an impact. If you also have ADHD, then your neurology will be different, and that will impact on how you sleep. If you've got physical issues like reflux, gastric reflux makes you incredibly uncomfortable and it burns, you wouldn't find it easy to sleep with that. If you have constipation or gastric issues, that makes it really uncomfortable. You have to be physically comfortable in order to sleep well. So finding out what those issues are is really important. If you're anxious or you're depressed, then that also has an impact on sleep. And sleep has an impact on anxiety and depression. It makes it worse. Sleep deprivation makes all that worse, as does exhaustion and learning and memory issues. All of those things are far more common in autistic people, and they have an impact on sleep, and sleep has an impact on those. That's interesting. I wonder why that went like that. So I've got 6 top tips for good sleep hygiene, things that can help you to have a good night. The first thing is to have a regular sleep routine. So that means doing the same things the same way every night. You're cueing your body, you're cueing your mind, you're cueing your routine to get you in the right place to sleep. One of the things that means is not having a large meal less than 2 hours before you go to sleep, because you can't sleep on a full stomach. But often it's very helpful to have a small snack, and ideally not something with lots of protein. There are things to avoid eating just before you go to bed and drinking. Avoiding coffee or anything with caffeine in, or any stimulants, is really good. So if you're on any medication for ADHD, you'd normally be advised not to have that in the afternoon, and to have it so that it starts to leave the body before you try and go to sleep. Hot chocolate is also a stimulant, so that's not good either. Hot milk is fantastic, as is bananas, and anything that contains tryptophan. So perversely, turkey, thinking about Christmas, turkey helps you to go to sleep. That's why we all doze off in front of the Queen's speech. Keeping the bedroom cool, calm and quiet. Quiet, incredibly important for those with sensory issues, obviously. Having no screens at least 1 hour before bed. We're very sensitive to blue light. So that means no TV, no phones, no iPads, anything that's got blue light in it, nothing like that for an hour before bed. So a book is wonderful, listening to a talking book or a CD is fantastic, but no screens, please, preferably longer. And having a regular wake up time is really helpful because it's all about getting the same routines going and having them repeatable. Your body learns, your body likes the predictability. So, what happens when that doesn't work? Well, NICE, the National Institute for Clinical Excellence, in part of their support and management for children with autism, have recommended the following. That if you have a particular issue with sleep, as so many of our autistic young people do, you should assess what the problem is, work out what's causing it. Is it a physical problem? Is it a dietary problem? Are there particular allergies? Are there sensory sensitivities that are preventing that young person go to sleep? All those things that we've just talked about, do those have an impact? Work out what those are. The second part of that is to keep a sleep diary. Now, if you keep a sleep diary, you can work out what helps. That's really, really important as they get older and begin to take more responsibility for their sleep pattern. And as you're getting teenagers to take more responsibility, they have to understand that what they do has an impact. So gaming on Fortnite or whatever at midnight is going to have an impact on their sleep, it's going to have an impact on the following day, and making that connection with them is helping them to understand what the impact of that will be. Because they will become an adult and they will be responsible for their own routines. Use behavioural interventions before trying drugs. So it's things around making sure that sleep hygiene is good, making sure that your young person understands what sleep is and how to go into it, and the fact that it takes 20 to 30 minutes to fall asleep most times for most people. So it doesn't happen just like that. And that it is a safe and lovely place for a young person to be. They feel safe, so sleep is good. One top tip, if you have an animal or a family member and you say that they went to sleep and then they died in their sleep, don't use those words. Just say that someone has died. Don't say, oh, they fell asleep, because that can cause a lifetime of sleep problems for an autistic person. Be very careful about the words that you use, please, please, please. If somebody dies, they die. If someone goes to sleep, they go to sleep, okay? So you must be very clear about what those behavioural interventions will be. There are drugs that can help. Melatonin is one that's often used for treatment in adults. It's not licensed for treatment in children, but it can be used in clinic, off-label. Melatonin is a hormone that you have within your body. It's naturally produced by the body, but it can sometimes help children to fall asleep. It can help the beginning part of that sleep process if that proves impossible for them. But you should try other things first. You should also consult a specialist paediatrician. Oh, I think I spelled that wrong, sorry. And then if you are using anything like melatonin, that process should be reviewed to make sure that they work and that the risks that are involved in having any form of drug are weighed up against the benefits. That should happen regularly. I would suggest every 6 months, but I don't think the guidelines specify how often, it just says regularly. And that there are cases within which you must refer to a specialist sleep expert. That's if you hear really loud snoring, if you hear someone choking, so they like that, that's choking, you want to refer them to a sleep expert, or if the person stops breathing for a period when asleep. So that's otherwise called sleep apnea. If they stop breathing, you suddenly hear. But if it's for any period, most people will do that for a second, 2 seconds, but if that happens for any longer period, please get that checked out, because that's something you need to check. And then there's some helpful resources for you here. There's some really good information from Research Autism, which is around what interventions work and why and how. Good information there from the National Autistic Society. There's a whole page on sleep. And these two guides I found really helpful. So this is around what good sleep hygiene is normally. This isn't around what sleep hygiene is specifically for autistic people, but this is the place to start with good sleep hygiene first. They've got a good night guide for adults, and they've got a really helpful good night guide for children, which goes into a bit more detail about things like bedwetting and how to deal with that. So I hope that's been helpful to you. As ever, if you come to this anywhere other than through my being a member of the Different Joy Club, please go ahead and sign there. If you're getting it on YouTube, please subscribe, hit like and comment. Tell me what's worked for you, what helps you to sleep and your young person to sleep more effectively. I hope that's worked well for you. Take care. Speak to you soon. Lots of love. Bye.